What they discovered is that they could generate such a strong energy field.
Both of these cultures had the same advanced machining with these stones. We may not even be able to do today with the tools that we have available.
Look at the Annunaki story that Zachariah Sitchin talks about. We get these Akkadian cylinder seals. What's really great about these, it's sort of like we get a little memory stick that has all this ancient knowledge that you can just plug in. It has the story encoded on it. Well, check this out. It has the story encoded on it. We just roll it all out in front of some clay. What we have over here is we have Anki, and some would say this is the Tigris and the Euphrates River coming out of him, but it's just two streams of fish. We could also look at that as Poseidon, and we have the various gods in their glory showing themselves. Imagine a world that was inhabited by godlike beings that possessed superior capabilities and technologies, so they decided to have an offspring who became us. Now, this is the Annunaki story, those who from heaven to earth came, and that is what you saw in the clip we played before today's show. So what we're going to discuss is what the early Sumerians, Akkadians, Assyrians, and Babylonians knew. There were these beings on earth that were our progenitors, and we see connections there to the Atlantis story. So to discuss this, I brought on my very good friend, Billy Carson, who is an accomplished author, researcher, and he is also the CEO of Forbidden Knowledge TV. And you probably have seen him before on Gaia and Ancient Aliens. But today I'm going to ask him all sorts of questions about this, and we're going to delve deep into this subject. Of course, every show we have to tell you about these amazing orgone pyramids that are made by our friend Michelle Hood over at Light the Light Pyramids. Definitely check them out. They'll keep your office and your home feeling very good energy-wise. And I always tell you guys that how I get through my day and how I feel great is not only coffee. I do drink a lot of coffee, but of course, I take these functional mushrooms, lion's mane, I take cordyceps, I get them from Neurobuddha. And funny story, this is a true story, not only does Billy, from when I've hung out with him, not only does he take functional mushrooms and monoatomic gold, amongst other things, and I still swear to this day that he is actually an Anunnaki. That's what I always tell him. But this man only sleeps 4 hours a night. Billy, is that true?
That's so true. I memean, obviously, I have witnesses to this. One being Elizabeth, my sister, and many others. But yeah, even last night again, another 4-hour night. It's not something that I try to do. It's just something that no matter what time zone I'm in, 4 hours seems to be my max. I think that I'm so focused on projects and information and research. I've been researching since 3 a.m. today, and now it's 12 o'clock noon. So I've been going nonstop.
I love that about you. And when I've hung out with you at various conferences and we'll be talking, and I said, well, what have you been doing all night? And you said, well, I was writing a new book. I've read like 3 books. And you're like, hey, I learned about this, and this, and it's amazing. Your mind never shuts off. Do you find that the monoatomic gold makes a difference into the way that your mind works?
I think so, because when I run out or run low and I have to get more, sometimes there was a lapse in between when I get a new bottle. Sometimes I have 3 or 4, but I run out. I forget to reorder. And I notice a slight fall off in my ability to just maintain my attention and focus on one specific thing at a high level. It's not like a major fall off, but I can feel it. I can notice it. So I really do believe that the monoatomic gold is creating that speed in the synapses in my mind, and also creating that focus. Which is why I actually bought the company that I was buying it from, and now I sell it on my website. I
would love to try some of the monoatomic gold that you guys have. I've had it from a few different sources, and also Timothy Hogan makes it. He's got an alchemy lab, so he said he was going to give me some of his. I want to try that as well. But in the past, when I've had it, I've done some sublingually under the tongue for a while, and oh my God, I could feel it. You feel it in your dreams. Yeah. You feel it in your thoughts. Do you find that it makes you more intuitive? Like, can you feel people's energy more?
I think it definitely makes you a little bit more intuitive. And also it allows me to have controlled dreams. So I actually have the ability when I take it, if I take it at night, I can go and have a controlled dream. And I use that to manifest my life. So I go into controlled dreams where I'm manifesting my reality. before it even happens. And I'm living as if what the manifestation is has already happened. So it's pretty cool stuff.
For those who have been following your work, they know you as an investigative researcher and journalist. You have traveled all over the world. Obviously, you never sleep, for God's sake. And you're always going somewhere new. In fact, you're an accomplished musician. You did the soundtrack for the most recent documentary. And it's amazing the other musicians that you're working with, from Crooked Eye to these amazing people that have been in the industry. Dame Dash, incredible that he put Jay-Z on the map, and so many people like that. But also, you just got back from Hawaii, and I want to say congratulations on the engagement. That's amazing. And we definitely want to have Elizabeth on the show to talk about how you can biohack your life. But where are you headed next?
We were actually headed to Peru in a few days, but we had to reschedule that because there were some conflicting things going on down there. And we didn't want to be in a situation where we can get stuck like up in the mountains of Bolivia or something. So we had to put that off. So I would have been leaving. I would have been packing right now, leaving tomorrow morning early. But the next stop is just a couple of short trips, one over to LA, a couple of short trips to LA. But then in terms of long, haul, going way out there, we're headed out to London, Manchester, in the UK. Then we're also headed out to Ethiopia, India, Turkey, to Göbekli Tepe, Karahan Tepe, Derinkuyu, Cappadocia, back to Egypt again for 2 tours back to back. I'm taking 100 people on each tour. One's a 10-day tour, the other one's a 5-day tour. For the people who can't go that long, I'll stay back to back and do those, and just continue to travel. We're there's so many places that we're going to. Singapore, Cambodia is another huge trip we have. We're taking a huge tour to Cambodia in November. That's booking out really fast. Going to take everybody to Angkor Wat, and about 37 miles of hiking through the jungles in Cambodia to all the other ancient temple sites out there. It's got a lot of great stuff going on for next year. With
Cambodia, you'll definitely have to look for that Stegosaurus that's on the wall there. How did they know about? Yeah, how did they know about that? And with Bolivia, I was going to mention that to you. When you guys mentioned you were going to Peru tomorrow, I talked to Brian Forrester almost every day, and it's been dicey up there. It's so incredible to go up to Lake Titicaca and all those places, but it's really worth it to reschedule the trip. If you're going to be up in Peru and you can't do Bolivia, it's worth it to reschedule so you can do them both. Yeah. You've been up there before, though, haven't you?
I haven't been to Bolivia, to Lake Titicaca and some of the other places up there, like what's the other place? Pumapunku.
Yeah.
And Lake
Tiwanaku.
And Tiwanaku. I'm sorry, Tiwanaku. I haven't been there yet, so I was really looking forward to this trip. And Brian Forster was going to join us on that leg of the trip. We had his flight booked and everything, and his hotel set up. But sometimes you just have to take the financial loss and wait until the appropriate time, because we're filming there, and we don't want to have a situation. There's too many of us in this group to have a situation, so we're just going to wait a little bit longer until the timing is right. Divine timing is everything. And when the time is right, we'll be able to get out there and knock it out and film that whole series. We're going to film a whole season there on site for one of our TV shows on Forbidden Knowledge TV.
Yeah, that's cool. But you're absolutely right about that divine timing. I found any time that I tried to force something to work, when you don't look at the signs and you don't pay attention to them, that things tend to unravel and fall apart. And I know that you've taught that in a lot of principles that you've put out there as well, that there's not only do you have an aspect of being, people have to be smart in business, as I know you've taught a lot of people out there and you've educated others, and you're really a great inspiration for people, man. Not only are you spreading knowledge and wisdom, but there are so many other great things that you've been working on over at Forbidden Knowledge TV, and one of those is the Black Knight satellite. And as we were just discussing before the show, what an amazing success that was. And you were incredible on there with bringing your research into there. You had Jimmy Church on there. You had Freddie Silva. You had Van Doniken. You had Roderick Martin. There were so many amazing people coming together to put that research out there. And I want to ask you about that. But first of all, let's just watch a quick trailer, give everybody a sneak peek at what that is.
We're going against the wind. The wind's 120 knots from the west. Look at that thing, dude. You know, you're dealing with all of these objects that are hanging out over your sensitive military installations, nuclear facilities, and now you're seeing objects in orbit.
After I enhanced it a little bit more, I could see that there was almost two halves to this craft. This is something that is intelligently made.
Somebody is watching us. We should at least know who it is and why.
The watchers are called the messengers.
Yes.
They keep watch on us because they're thinking, well, perhaps they're not going in the right direction.
This is an actual NSA document. They are talking about communication through specific frequencies and then how we could communicate back with ET.
Houston, this is Discovery. We still have the alien spacecraft under apparent.
This Black Knight is somehow correlated with the Vultus constellation.
I think there's a lot more to it.
An early reptilian race brought this satellite into orbit.
These so-called satellites are to observe the planets, to listen. The universe is full of these probes.
What I think is the most important thing to understand, are we being watched, who is watching us, and where are they from? I am Billy Carson, and this is my investigation into the Black Knight satellite.
That is just one of the most amazing new revelations that we can look at, that there's something that ancient that's coming around the earth that could have been left there. What was your inspiration for this?
You know, my inspiration was I had really started digging into ancient tablets and texts and learning about the ancient Sumerians. And through the research in that area, I came across the Black Knight satellite years and years ago. And at first I said, oh, yeah, whatever. And then it came up again, and it came up by the third time. I said, okay, this is in my face 3 times. Let me dig into it and see if there's anything there. And the more I dug, the more I found, and the more links I was making with other research I had already done. And I said, wow. So I took some time, probably, I don't know, almost 8 years. And nobody ever covered the links that I was able to make to ancient civilizations. And so finally I said to myself, you know what, about 2.5 years, I said, you know what, I need to make a documentary on this because this story needs to be told. People need to understand what's really going on and what's happened. One of the greatest things, you know, instead of looking for an exoplanet 20 million light years away that potentially could harbor life, we have something right above our heads that nobody even knows exists. So I said, it's time. So I decided to write the documentary for the Black Knight satellite. And, you know, now it's been out now for about, I don't know, 6-7 months, and it already has won Independent Film of the Year for, you know, for a documentary.
And it's amazing. I was showing you, and I'll put up the image on the screen, that even here in Hungary, after you released the Black Knight satellite documentary, after it came out, they started rolling it out in the front page of their magazines over here, right in the newsstands. That was your influence. You did this.
Wow.
And so it's your message has reached around the world, and the adventures that you've taken and your research has gone to all kinds of strange places. And one that you and I talked about over dinner before, when we were sitting around with some folks, that you said you had gone out and rented a helicopter and flown into the Grand Canyon, and you're looking for something very specific. Can you tell everyone about that?
Yeah, well, I had heard and read about the ancient Egyptian artifacts that were down there in the Grand Canyon and discovered, and some were removed by the Smithsonian, but also that some of these things couldn't be removed because they were actual carvings in the stone down there. And I was like, wow, this is amazing. So based on my research, I found an area of the canyon that I figured would be a high probability. And so got on a helicopter, flew down into the canyon because that was the easiest way instead of hiking and going and getting lost, you know, or finding a guide and taking days to get there and having to camp. Just take a helicopter. I found a helicopter that could land. We landed there. They gave us a specific area that we had to stay in because this side of the line was holy land by the indigenous tribes, and this side was off limits because it was cordoned off and owned by NASA. And I'm like, wait a minute, NASA? That's the area that I wanted to go into. So when it became lunchtime, everybody, you know, they crank up the lunch, like 3 or 4 helicopters land down there, and they have these little picnic tables in this little area. And while everybody's eating, I'm sneaking off. I'm trying to go down into this area where you can see an opening in the cavern. And I'm like, let me see if I can get down in there. And so as I'm going down, all of a sudden, out of nowhere, here's this, I have to say military, but although I have to say there weren't any particular type of markings on the outfit. It was all black with a black hat, AR-15, though. I know what that looks like. And I was told I couldn't come in. And I'm like, what in the world? Like, where'd you guys come? It's like, why can't I go back there? I don't understand. It's just, I have no weapons. I just want to see what's in here. He said, this area is owned by NASA. So he confirmed it to me again and told me, turn around and walk away. I was like, wow. And then when I turned to walk away, looking up across the other line, where the Holy Land was for the indigenous tribes, there was like a chief or his, the leader of the people standing there looking straight down at me.
Wow.
And I was like, I guess I got no chance here. So I just went over and sat down and had my lunch and took a lot of photos, hopped in the helicopter, and we flew out. But that tells me something. Same thing is going on down there at Chaco Canyon, where now NASA owns the rights to those, what look like to be ancient dome structures in Chaco Canyon. And now they also have the rights to the interior of the Great Pyramid at Giza. So this is my mind-blowing stuff. What is going on? I was told that soon they may close off entry into the King's Chamber, NASA. How can they have this kind of power and control? And what is driving this? Pretty interesting.
It is very interesting. And do you know what's really interesting about your story? Is that Timothy Hogan absolutely corroborates it. When he had been hiking up there a few years back, he was hiking up there and he was arrested after reaching the area with the Egyptian area. And he said that the one good thing about this is that he managed to get some pictures, which we'll make sure we get the pictures over to you. He said there was an Anubis and all these carvings in the walls that are up there. So he can get that over to you. But he said what was very interesting about this is that when these guys approached him into the area that he had hiked into, that they weren't quite, it was just like you say, they weren't quite park rangers. It wasn't really sure what they were. And then get this, he was given some citation tickets. So he called up a lawyer and they went to go challenge it. And they went and called to see where these guys were. And it was some BS office that they were registered to that didn't even show up. And so it was a very strange story. And in fact, I was half thinking it would be cool to have you and him on at the same time talking about this. And but I think it's cool that you were willing to go there and you were willing to just jump right into there and go figure it out. That's the adventurous spirit in you. Now, speaking of the ancient Egyptians, you have written some very famous books that are bestsellers. Can you tell us about what was your inspiration for looking into the Emerald Tablets?
Yeah. Well, as again, just through my research, I came across the Emerald Tablets of Thoth and the Emerald Tablet singular of Hermes. And I was like, wow, could these be real? And as I dug deeper into it, I found a lot of correlations and links to great people from the ancient past, not too long ago. Isaac Newton has a copy of a translation that's at the Cambridge Library. And so I'm like, so this stuff is tangible things. This is something tangible. There's a history or a record or an account of it, of the Emerald Tablets themselves, plural tablets, being taken to the Vatican and being put in the archives. I said, well, let me dig into this. And the more I dug into it, I began to read the Emerald Tablets. And the more I read them, the more enlightenment I got out of them, the more wisdom I got, the more correlations between quantum physics and this philosophy I saw. And I'm going, this is crazy. 36,000-year-old text that has this level of knowledge and wisdom. I said, even if this was from the 1920s, it would be ahead of its time. And so I said I had to do a story on it because I would talk to people about the Emerald Tablets and they would tell me they've been reading it, but they can't understand it. They can't grasp all of it, or they would only focus on small aspects of the meanings, but couldn't really see the whole big picture. And I thought if I did a compendium, which is allowing me to break down the information in a way that the average person can fundamentally understand it, digest and discern it, I think it would be a hit. And that's exactly what happened. The book has now been a bestseller for 4 years straight. It's been averaging out of 365 days in a year, it averages about over 150 days at #1 on Amazon.
Incredible, man. And congratulations. That's amazing.
Thank you.
And somebody needed to interpret it because when you read these texts, sometimes they can be very cryptic. And of course, we have so many different encoded layers to it. The beautiful hermetic principles of the all is mine and the universe is mental, or you go into this and you could have this ascending and descending aspects, which could be alchemy with the condensation and this transformation process. I think which is really cool about this, though, this story, as you mentioned with Hermes, Thoth, this is a character I always see coming up around you. You seem to have this absolute affinity with Thoth. Can you tell us about who Thoth is and why is Thoth so important to you?
Well, according to the ancient Egyptians, not according to Billy Carson, according to the ancient Egyptians and their own records, you got to say that sometimes, because people think he just, he ruled over the land of Chem for 14,000 years, one man. And, you can go see the king's list in Egypt at the Temple of Seti at Abydos. But he ruled over men for 14,000 years. This is pre-dynastic. And he had written several tablets, not just one, but several, actually over 100. But what was interesting to me that drew me to him is that he authored his own tablets. In other words, he was his own scribe. A lot of these kings or these rulers or these quote-unquote gods, the Netiru, they would have a scribe. They would dictate to a scribe, and the scribe would write the information. But Thoth says, no, I wrote these myself. So now I'm getting like firsthand. In other words, when you dictate to somebody, that person can miss a couple of words. They can condense a sentence or two. But that means you're getting as close to the possible thought process of the person that it's coming from. If they dictate it themselves, if they write it themselves, so they scribe it themselves. So I said, let me read this, and it was so powerful because I saw a lot of correlations between what Thoth was saying and what I had read in terms of Jesus's vocalizations and quotes of Jesus, Yeshua, in the modern day Bible. And I said, wait a minute. The Bible was written between 100 AD to 900 AD. It wasn't written 2,000 years ago like people believe. Between 100 AD by Phoenicians, followers of who? Hermes Trismegistus, a.k.a. Thoth. So I'm going, oh, wow, there's a correlation here. So was Yeshua speaking words that he had learned from this guy? Because I found out that Jesus had went to Egypt at the age of 12, and he left out of the Bible. He disappeared from the Bible, biblical text. He was in Egypt, and he lived in Coptic Cairo, which I'm sure you've been there before, to the house that he lived in. And I found out that he was learning the Egyptian mysteries there. And so now it made a lot of sense to me because the Emerald Tablets were, and the teachings of Thoth were the beginning of the mystery schools. And Yeshua was an adept initiate into the Egyptian mysteries. So what I saw was what he was quoting and what the statements he were making were coming from this guy named Thoth, his teacher, probably his mentor in some way, shape, or form through the ages. And so I was able to put these verses side by side, the Emerald Tablets and the biblical text, and you can see he's saying the same exact thing. And so you have to say, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? It makes this guy Thoth a very interesting person, because if his text truly is as old as we think it is, we're talking about everything that the fundamental basis of all religions is coming out of this one tablet.
That's very interesting. And we do know that Jesus would have gone to Alexandria. And Alexandria, what people have to realize is that in those times, it was like a Las Vegas. It was a very liberal city. There was a lot of different books and records there, obviously, as you know. I mean, especially in the times when we would have been talking about Jesus, Ptolemy already would have built that up from the days of Alexander. It would have been built up there. It was an incredible place of learning. And I think you're right on with what you're saying about the mystery schools and whatnot. But I also want to bring it over to back to Thoth with you, since you are the Emerald Tablets guy. And I every time I think of the Emerald Tablets, I think of you holding the Emerald Tablets. But with that, does he not say, I, Thoth the Atlantean? And do we find a way to connect him into Atlantis through that?
Yeah, he is the Atlantean. He says he's an Atlantean priest king. Well, at least that's what the pyramid priests called him, an Atlantean priest king. And that ruled over the land of Chem. And when he first encountered, after the Great Flood in the tablets, he encounters the people of the land of Chem. He comes there to help them rebuild. It says rebuild, not to start from the beginning, but to rebuild, meaning they had already achieved a high level prior to the flood. He's there to help them re-kickstart their civilization. And the people begin to grovel at his feet, and he raises them up and says, hey, guys, I'm just a son of Atlantis. He's saying, I'm an Atlantean. I'm not a god. This is why I had so much respect for this entity of this being, because a lot of his relatives, they would just masquerade as gods. You know, they would take, oh, they want to worship. I'll let them worship me. I can now manipulate these people. But this guy, for whatever reason, he didn't do that. He actually said, no, I'm a son of Atlantis. Just like Yeshua would say, I'm a son of man in the biblical text. Interesting.
Isn't it amazing that Yeshua, in the stories that we find, not only in the canonical and the scriptures, but also the non-canonical, there's all kinds of things he's doing. But Yeshua does this miracle when this eye is plucked out, he heals it and does some spit and puts it back in.
Right.
When you go look over, when we look at the papyri of Annie and all these, Thoth is doing the same miracle. He's spitting on an eye, he's licking an eye and putting it back in. It's the same story, and it's put together
the same
there.
Story.
It is. So I want to bring that back over to Atlantis, since you started bringing this up. We see these same characters coming up. And of course, I know that you've talked a lot about the Anunnaki before, and you're a great expert on the Anunnaki. That's why I wanted to have you also on the show today. There's so many awesome subjects I could talk to you about. And so we only touched down on a few of them. But with this, of course, probably the most famous person out there who's ever talked about the Anunnaki is Zecharia Sitchin. And there have been others. There was many others before him that talked about it, as you know. But where do you see Thoth fitting in the Anunnaki story, and how does that start to come together then with this Atlantean statement?
What I discovered was that the Atlanteans are the Anunnaki. And that any being that comes to Earth from space is an Anunnaki. It's a generalized term, meaning those who came from heaven to Earth. Just like if me and you left here and went to Mars and met people on Mars that were Martians, they would say, "Where are you guys from?" We would say, "We're Earthlings," right? But I still would be an American, and you would still be from whatever country you're from. So we're not going to tell them. I know you're from so many countries, but you're all over the place. But we would tell them. I wouldn't say I'm a Floridian. I'm a Floridian. I would say I'm an Earthling, right, from Earth. And so it's the same thing. Anunnaki is a generalized term. We have people coming from multiple star systems to Earth. They built this breakaway civilization called Atlantis, and there was more than one capital. The ring city that everyone talks about and dreams about was just one capital of many that existed on Earth at the same time. So in true reality, we're all standing on top of Atlantis right now. Atlantis was the entire planet. So we find that the Anunnaki, generalized name, the majority of them that were here at that time, 450,000 years ago, were Atlanteans. They had built the Atlantean civilization, not only on Earth, but on the moon, Mars, and even other planets and moons in this solar system.
I couldn't agree with you more. I absolutely agree with your statement. And this idea that Atlantis was in one little corner, it's completely untenable. All over the world, we find pyramids everywhere on both sides of the Atlantic. We find them not only in Indonesia, we find them in China, we find them in Peru, where you were going to go. They're everywhere, in the Yucatan. Yeah. But it's interesting because when we talk about Zecharia Sitchin, some people will criticize him and they'll pull him apart, even though his theories were so amazing, what he came out when he was cranking it out in these books. And it's quite interesting that if you go and look at the man, he had this clear vision of where he was going with that information when he was putting it out. And I want to talk a little bit about how he broke that down with you and bring these various characters into it. But actually, there's a show on Forbidden Knowledge TV that is the Odyssey of Enoch that you have out there right now, where we got to talk about Jordan Maxwell's life. And on that show, if everybody watching this at home, go to Forbidden Knowledge TV, sign up, start watching the shows. The content is growing all the time. There's some just absolutely amazing content on there. And on the show, we were very lucky. As you know, we got to get some exclusive stuff that I wasn't allowed to release until Jordan Maxwell passed away. And one of those things were some clips and videos and pictures that he said I could release later. Sitchin told him privately that the Anunnaki came into the room with him and talked to him and told him what to put in the books and helped him with the work, which is pretty mind-blowing. And I was just going to show a quick clip from the Odyssey of Enoch that's streaming right now on Forbidden Knowledge TV. Let's check it out.
I know you knew Sitchin well. Do you think that between what you gathered from Sitchin or what you think yourself in your spirit, do you think these Anunnaki were reptile people, or were they humanoid like us?
You know what? I'm not sure, and I wish I would have asked that. I didn't stop to ask that kind of a question of him.
Oh, I
know that he was, on a one-on-one relationship with them.
Oh, for sure.
Oh no, I know that for sure. He told me he was.
It's amazing
that he talked with them one-to-one, face-to-face. But That's another thing, you know. I could cause quite a stir in the community around the world if I started talking about the people I know and what they've told me in private.
Holy smokes!
That would start a big fire. If I go on a radio, on my own network radio show, and talk about Zachariah Sitchin and what he said to me in private that nobody knows,
that's
you
amazing.
wait to see how quick that gets around the world, boy.
That's the thing. I mean, the things that you know and the extraordinary people and experiences you've had are just mind-blowing.
And when we see this, it's like, oh my God, we got to go back and re-examine this. What was your first brush in with Zachariah Sitchin's work? What was the first book you checked up from him?
The first book was The Lost Book of Enki for Zachariah Sitchin. Obviously, I have all of his books. And as I read The Lost Book of Enki, going in with a clear mind, not having any, perception of what it should be or what it was going to be. And what intrigued me initially is a lot of his references are underneath each paragraph in all of his books. So the idea that he just wrote these books off the top of his head is ridiculous, because his references are throughout the book and then in the back. Mm-hmm. So I started going, wow, this story is amazing. And I would go back to his references, and he would reference different texts and different books and different scriptures and tablets. And I started finding real correlation. So his information to me was it exact? His interpretation? Maybe not, but there is no exact interpretation. It's all conjecture. However, it's based off of tablets of ancient texts and scriptures that already exist. So we hypothesize and come up with, the best scenario. And I think he came up with one of the closest best scenarios. After going through his books and then going, okay, how can I analyze these tablets myself to see for myself? I found the UCLA CDLI online cuneiform Digital Library Initiative. That's a mouthful. Obviously, I've spent some time on this website, right? And it's available online. It's free for the general public. UCLA hosts tablets that you can grab off the virtual shelf and drop into the translator online and read them for yourself.
Wow.
And I started reading these tablets, and I started realizing something. Zachariah Sitchin wasn't too far off. I think that he was pretty spot on in terms of the idea and the concept that beings from another place came here, engaged and worked on this planet to create a civilization, at some point decided to engage mankind and turn us into their slaves and workers. And that's exactly what happened. And then we became an abandoned seed colony.
Yeah, that's well said. And it's interesting because in our conversation we had with Paul Tice, who was his closest friend and publisher, that's on the show when we're talking about Jordan Maxwell, when he was referring to Sitchin, because he was very close friends with Sitchin as well, Paul Tice was. He was his personal photographer. And what he had said is that today there's a lot of people that will criticize Sitchin because these later Sumerian translator dictionaries came out, and he said they would try to criticize Sitchin, but the cuneiform and the earlier forms that Sitchin was translating, there wasn't a big broad definition. He said the difference would be sort of like going back and people translating old English compared to today's English, and you might have a word that has 4 or 5 different meanings. Like we were talking about how woke has changed so many times, that meaning of that word, and it's like you can't really, it would be even more drastic than that. So Sitchin, as you said correctly, he was right on with that. And you have a new show with Matt LaCroix on Forbidden Knowledge TV looking into the Annunaki, don't you?
We actually discussing the Annunaki and various other topics as well. Actually, one of the shows where we're going to film a season was going to be for season 2 in Peru, which is going to be delayed. But season 1 is live right now, and we go over a lot of incredible information. And then Matthew LaCroix also just came up with a brand new show on Forbidden Knowledge TV called Mystery School of Truth, where it's primarily about the Anunnaki. There's a lot of great content about the Anunnaki. If somebody wants to really learn and go dig deep into it and find out where to get the research material or hear from professional researchers and people who have studied the tablets firsthand, that's where you can go to Forbidden Knowledge TV. And then I have my own new show coming out called Anunnaki History. So it's going to go all the way back and start from the Pleiadian star system, a galactic war from 3 million years ago, and move forward in time gradually through all the different seasons. So it's going to be an amazing series.
I can't wait to check that out, but everyone at home, let's now watch a preview.
discussing a hidden struggle that has dominated the rise and fall of civilizations for thousands of years, and how at its core, it defines nearly everything in our reality. And these two symbols may be known to those around our society, but not really understood. And those two symbols are the eagle and the serpent, that has been known as War of the Gods and War in Heaven throughout our entire history. These Annuna gods of Enki and Enlil, who in this story discusses how he's a cruel and a jealous god over humanity, and that he's threatened by how powerful the perfect man that was created, Adapa or Adama, became. The more we understand that the wisdom and the truth has been there right in front of us all along. And we simply need to listen to what they're telling us and not be controlled by them any longer. But there was a problem. As I stated, human beings were living too long. It caused us to gain too much knowledge over time. We didn't die. We were immortal to start. My name is Matthew LaCroix, and welcome to my new series called Mystery School of Truth.
So, Billy, we know the Anunnaki were here. We know that they had built up civilization, but there's clearly this family drama that we see unfolding. And I want to break down some of this because you did mention that they had these various cities on Earth that were established. And obviously, when you have various cities on Earth, there's a lot of civil rivalry. You know, we've heard of Eridu and Bob Tibir and Larak and all these sort of places, these 5 cities with 8 rulers that had a span of 241,200 years in the Sumerians' kings list. But we hear a lot about these 2 brothers in Enlil and Enki. And we hear about the progenitors Anu and Inanna. Can you tell us about that and how that unfolds into this family?
Yeah, definitely. Well, you know, it's amazing because Enki, Enki, Earth is named after him. Ki means earth. Ei is the first 2 initials of the appropriation of his name. So it really became Earth. It comes out of Enki. So Enki's name, Earth is named after him. His brother Enlil became the ruler of Earth, even though numerically, because they had a numeric system in terms of their ranking, Enki was higher than Enlil, but it's never quite clearly spelled out in any of the tablets why the flip-flop where Enki became the master geneticist only, even though the Earth was named after him, and that Enlil's brother superseded him and actually ended up becoming the ruler. Enlil becomes Yahweh in the modern-day Bible. That's who Yahweh is. It's Enlil. And many other people across, many other different civilizations. But what's incredible is the fact that they had their own breakaway civilization here, and they were working for about 200 and 250,000 rough years on their own with their EGG workers. These were the lower class Anunnaki that were working and doing a lot of the digging in the trenches and the canals and the building.
Were those the Watchers?
Those were the Watchers, yes. And so these EGGs are talked about in the Enuma Elish and the Epic of Atrahasis. Well, we find that there was this big war coming. This is where it gets important. So this war was going to come where the EGG, the sons of Anu, sons of God, fell to the earth. They fell. These were the fallen angels. They fell from Mars to Earth. They were working a lot on Mars as well. And they had a lot of complaints. The fact that they were doing all this labor. They weren't supposed to be like slaves. They didn't have any women. It was another big complaint in these tablets. They had no women. And so they were demanding rest and women. And if they didn't get them, they were going to destroy Enlil, Enki, Anu, and his sisters, and Hersag, and everybody else. So an agreement was made one night when this war was getting ready to actually really happen. They had fallen down to earth and encircled the camp in South Africa at Adam's calendar. And there's the tablets say there was a rabble at the door. These people were getting ready to come in and kick the doors down and kill them to get out of this slavery, quasi-slavery. And Enki says, I have a solution. We're going to take the existing hominid on this planet and we're going to add our essence to it and get it to do the labor for us. And so an agreement was made. And now they started with this duplication process, so this cloning process. But it wasn't working out as well as they wanted because the clones couldn't mate for themselves, which means they had to keep making clones over and over again. And it was tedious work, and there were genetic mutations and things like that. And so it wasn't being perfected. This is where Enki's sister says, you know what? I'm going to take this to full term. I'm going to take an egg out of one of these beings. We're going to add our essence to that egg. This is called making a zygote. So they clean some genetic material out, put theirs in, put it in her womb. Then her saying, no, we're talking really about Isis in the Egyptian text, if you want to convert the name. And then Isis has this famous cylinder scroll where she's holding up the first Adamu, which means first man, which means the first genetically perfected version of Homo sapiens sapien that was able to then reproduce on his own. And they took then some more of his blood and cloned Eve, and then they were able to test that, and it worked. So then they made clones of Adam and created a whole genetic pool where then people can actually have, they would make them at specific times like animals to create this new race of Homo sapiens sapien. That was Eden. Eden was an outdoor laboratory which had guards. So it's pretty interesting. Now, this is where you get Genesis in the Bible. Genesis are the generations of Isis, because that's where the Adamu came out of her womb, Isis's womb. That's Gen-Isis or Genesis.
The whole thing with Genesis, it's incredible, is that when you look at that story at the beginning of the Bible, it doesn't say that everything was being created from scratch. That's a mistranslation. No. It says it's being recreated. And as you know, the Elohim is a plurality of beings that are coming in there, and they're recreating things. And another thing is that Christians get this wrong. The Christians get this wrong because when the King James Bible was translated, and it had the help that you'd see from Sir Francis Bacon, he was very good, as Jordan Maxwell always said, very good with King's English, but the translators, they made some mistakes. So, for example, that word where it says things were void and without form is tohu vavohu. And that's only used in one other place in the Bible, which is really interesting where it's used. It's used in the book of Jeremiah. But if you look up in, let's say, the Bullinger's Study Bible, which I have behind me, that you say, okay, where was that word tohu vavohu that Christians say was everything was from void and without form? In Jeremiah, it says Jeremiah was brought above the earth. He's looking down at the earth. And it says it was Zion. And it said there was these buildings on earth, but they were not built by man. They were built by the gods. And first of all, we got to ask, how the hell did he get up above the earth? Exactly. And secondly, it says it became tohu vavohu. It became waste and desolation, destruction. So it's absolutely amazing that we see that story encoded in there. But also bringing it back to what you're saying, you were talking about Anki, and I wanted to ask you about this. This is where I think we could paint the picture that Anki could be Poseidon from Atlantis, because on this, we see not only is he associated with these seafaring beings like the Atlantis story, but he's got these two rivers coming out of him with these fish. And some people say that's the Tigris and the Euphrates River. I wanted to ask you, what do you think about this idea that he was Poseidon, and what do you think that symbolism means?
Yeah, he definitely was Poseidon, in my opinion. You look at and you read the text and the tablets, you find that he made his abode in the Abzu, which is the waters. And so this guy was considered the god of the waters. And between Rome and Greece, he became Poseidon, he became Odin, many different names over the eons, because these beings lived for a very, very long time. Each of them had their own halls of Amenti, where they would go into their own rejuvenation chambers and rejuvenate their bodies, as well as they would drink something that their sister would make for them called the elixir of life. It was given to the heroes of old. They also called them the savants. And so they would drink this elixir, which had a combination of colloidal silver, monoatomic gold, THC, and something else. So, it was a leaf of the marijuana plant, which probably, in my opinion, must have been the CBD or the THC that was in there, with some other plant from under the water. So this combination drink, and that between that and the halls of Amenti that they had, they would rejuvenate their bodies. But they lived for a long time, but they had many different names.
Do you think it could be the blue lotus, the water lily?
It could be. I know that Gilgamesh was sent down to grab one, and it escaped him. He got it, but then something happened, and he couldn't bring it back to the surface.
I wanted to ask you about Gilgamesh. I was going to ask you about him, and you actually pulled that out of my mind, out of the when we look in the Enuma Elish and the 7 tablets of creation with Gilgamesh. Do you suppose that? I was actually going to ask you, was this the secret to their immortality, that they were using these alchemical concoctions?
Yeah, they were masters of alchemy, masters of it.
Absolutely. I agree with you.
Yeah, I agree with Kim. I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Okay. I was going to say chemistry and alchemy come from the land of Chem. That's the root word. Chem is for alchemy and chemistry. They became masters at that and had learned how to stop the degradation of telomeres on the DNA. They learned on the chromosomes, I'm sorry. So to stop the degradation of telomeres on the chromosomes in the human body, which can extend life significantly. They also learned how to heal degrading organs through different elixirs. And of course, also, Thoth talks about this a lot, the fact that they actually had a halls of Amenti, and even his father, Enki, in the Emerald Tablets, who's known as Thothme, the dweller, he had his own halls of Amenti, where he would lie asleep but awake. And he would walk amongst men, but unlike a man, because they would hop into other bodies and then walk around, and they would transfer into body to body. These weren't bodies of other people that they stole. They had created their own. The tablets say they created their own bodies, their own avatars, and they would walk amongst men unlike a men, but they would transfer from body to body. So between all those combination of genetic technologies and these halls of Amenti chambers, rejuvenation chambers, they can live for eons.
It could still be going on today. We could still be seeing that transpositioning of consciousness, which I think the technology does exist to do that. And we won't hear that in the light. Yeah, we won't hear that in the light of day. But with that, it's very interesting because when we talk about Chem or Kemet, and which literally means the black land, and when it relates to chemistry and alchemy, just as you said, the Bible makes references to this. It refers to the dark arts, and it actually calls it the what is it called? The black land, and it makes references directly to it, that we can see this alchemical references all through that of how important Egypt was to that. Let's bring it back to Egypt, because that's where the Atlantis story really comes from, as you know. When we look over there, you were making these connections not only with Isis, but Sitchin, I believe, had connect Enki also to Ptah. I could be wrong. It's been a while since I read his work, but Ra was Marduk, Nigashita was Thoth, and how he relates to these folks. And out of this sibling rivalry, if we want to say Nigashita and Marduk, when we pull them together, it's very interesting because there seems to be a difference between the two of them within Egypt later on, and also in Babylon, that Marduk seems to be coming back and forth with this. Maybe, I don't know if there was a streak of jealousy, would you say? What would you say was the story between those two?
Yeah, it's a dichotomy, those two. You're talking about like a yin and a yang. Nigashita, aka Thoth, aka Hermes, aka Poseidon. This guy was compassionate. Even though he genetically modified man, he added a little something extra in the modification, or the capability for us to ascend, in his own words, higher than even the Annunaki, which pissed off his brother Enlil significantly. And so Enki was a guy that was, just like his son, very compassionate. So Thoth had the same compassion in his heart, and will go around the planet teaching and enlightening human beings and trying to get them to reach a higher level of consciousness. But his brother, Marduk, aka Amun-Ra, he had a very jealous mindset, was jealous of Thoth, jealous of his capabilities and his brilliant mind, and all he cared about was ruling and power. Matter of fact, he even started a war. He was supposed to rule at a specific time. When Pisces came in, he was supposed to start his rule. He started a war before Pisces even entered, just to take over the kingship ahead of time, and he actually got it that time. Him and Thoth were fighting so much that Enki said, look, Thoth, go to the other side of the planet. Go start something over there. Go to Mesoamerica. And that's where he went, and he took some Olmecs with him from Africa, and he kickstarted the Teotihuacan civilization and built the whole complex of Teotihuacan all the way down to the Yucatan Peninsula and Chichen Itza. And his brother took over, and he took the face, which originally was the face of Thoth on the Great Sphinx. It never had a lion's head. It was always a man's face. He recarved it to his own son's face. So that is now Thoth's nephew's face we see on the Great Sphinx at Giza.
It's very interesting. And he was also associated with the serpents, right? So that, again, we have that Quetzalcoatl, and when we see that interpretation over, let's say, the Yucatan, that we'll see that come up again and again, that serpent symbology. And it's interesting, bring it back over to the Watchers, or the Gigi that you were talking about. With them, that there comes in a Mars connection, right? That's a place I wanted to ask you about also. You've spent a lot of time looking at Mars, more time looking at Mars than is healthy. I think you look at I think you look at it all day long, because every time I talk to you or see you, you always got new Mars anomaly research. What's new up there? What have they discovered? Because a friend of mine, I was just on the phone with him last night, a friend from California, and he was showing me this one physicist. I could bring him up. You're probably aware of this guy. There's a physicist that found evidence for the fact that he believes that hundreds of millions of years ago that there was nuclear war on Mars. His name is John Brandenburg.
Brandenburg, right.
Yeah, you're familiar with that theory. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, what's interesting is the Mars Global Surveyor, which has been above Mars for quite some time, and all the dozens of rovers that have been there have all detected weapons-grade xenon in the atmosphere and in the soil. Now, what's interesting about the xenon, it's weapons-grade. In other words, it's a byproduct of a nuclear fallout. That's the only way to get, as far as we know here on Earth, wow. The only way to get that byproduct of xenon is by a fallout, which means, and the abundance of it that's in the atmosphere and in the soil, it means that there was a nuclear war at some point in the distant past on Mars. And the evidence of it is the fact that Mars has been rocked and shifted, 2 potential pole shifts of the actual equator. We can detect now that it may have been shifted once through a natural geological disaster that happened, I believe, when the original 4th planet exploded, Tiamat, and a lot of it hit Mars. Now, the other one, it looks like it shifted another angle because of a nuclear war that happened where these bombs rocked the planet. And the reason why they call Mars the god of wars is because I believe in ancient times, there was a war. It was an Atlantean war that extended from Earth to the moon all the way to Mars. And they took the brunt of the hit there where the Igigi were. This war finally did happen. They tried to happen, they stalled it off, but eventually the war did happen, in my opinion. And I think Mars got shook pretty bad. There was evidence now of a global flood that flew over the land. It destroyed a lot of the structures there. But when you look at the Mars and look for anomalies, you find a lot of things sticking up out of the mud that shouldn't be there. And to me, adds credence to the fact that there was a war on Mars that destroyed the entire planet for the second time. The first time was geological. The second time it had recovered almost, but then it was destroyed again through a nuclear war.
That's incredible. And I want to ask you, since we just covered the Annunaki today, we just barely scraped the surface of it. Can we get you to come back to get into more of these subjects?
Oh, we have to, man. I'd love to come back and talk some more. I mean, we could talk for 20 years on this topic because there's so much information. It never ends.
I know, and I want to have you back. We got to get into this stuff because I always love talking to you. But the other thing I wanted to ask you about while I got you here is that a little while ago, you did a new show on Gaia that was with Dr. Stephen Greer, and you brought out some really great stuff with Greer because he's been doing this for so long, talking about the Disclosure Project and everything else. What was the biggest takeaway for you when sitting with Greer, who obviously has so much information on this subject? What was the most mind-blowing part of that conversation?
For me, the most mind-blowing part was the fact that one man had been able to get so much information and get so many people to come forward to tell their story, people who would have normally went to their deathbeds with this kind of information and knowledge, with the level of rank that they had. I mean, think about one of the hardest jobs they probably get in the world, to guard a nuclear silo or to be the scientist that puts the codes in the nukes. These are the kind of people that he had come forward and speak their truth as to what happened, when they were on base and at these missile flights. And so the fact that he was able to get not one, not two, but dozens of people to step up and speak, to me, that just shows me the power of, determination, will, and obviously whatever frequency he's on to get through to these people, to reach out to them and get them to agree, to put their lives and their family lives even on the line, to come forward with information that shouldn't be really, according to the military, never been spoken about. These guys just had enough and they had gone their entire lives. And, pretty much, I think some of them had maybe 10, 15 years left of life in them, just being realistic. And he was able to extract that from these men. And I think, to me, that was my biggest takeaway, his ability and his power to get this information to the masses the way that he did on national TV, that CNN press club years ago.
I agree with you. It was absolutely amazing. Billy, absolutely incredible information today. Can you tell the folks at home what they can look forward to coming up next? how they can find you. Are there any Forbidden Knowledge conferences coming up? Are there any Forbidden Knowledge promotions that our viewers could look forward to if they go and they sign up?
Yeah. Well, a lot of great things. First of all, if you go to 4bk.tv, you can get a free trial, 3-day free trial on Forbidden Knowledge TV. Once you sign up, you can watch it on Amazon Fire TV, Roku. You can watch it on Apple TV, iOS App Store, Google Play Store, and of course the web 4bk.tv. Make sure you watch Johnny Enoch show on there as well, of course. And a lot of brand new series out there, about 10 brand new series on network, plus my award-winning documentary, Black Knight Satellite Beyond the Signal. And then I'm going on a world tour in 2023. I'm going to stop at 4 or 5 major cities in the U.S. and then a couple of places internationally. We'll be announcing those locations soon. Also, on your calendar, July 30th, 2023, you got to be there, Miami, Florida, at the Adrian R. Center. It's already booked and set up and paid for. We're having the Forbidden Conscious Awards, the first annual Conscious Awards, 11 categories, 11 winners, voted for by the viewers and the people that follow these people, social media influencers, podcasters, TV hosts. We have all the categories in there, and one Lifetime Achievement Award. The winners will be flown in, put up in a hotel, first-class treatment, and it's going to be an amazing black tie affair. It's going to be on the level of the Oscars with no slaps, of course. And we're going to have a great time. That's coming July 30th, 2023. And then, of course, my 2 Egypt tours in October, which is on forbiddenknowledge.com if you want to register for those. And then my other tour, which is to Cambodia in November of next year. If you want to register, there's a few seats left for that. Again, forbiddenknowledge.com.
And there you have it, everybody. You heard it from the big boss of Forbidden Knowledge TV. Go to his website, Forbidden Knowledge TV, sign up, start streaming the shows, buy the books, go to the conferences. You got to check out these events. There's so many amazing things coming up. It's an exciting year. Everything is coming together. And everybody out there, remember to like, comment down below, subscribe, share this video with your friends. We'll talk to you all soon.